call for American Airlines Flight 11 with service.
A group of young men, mostly from the Middle East, came together in Hamburg, Germany, to form a cell under the auspices of Al-Qaeda. Among them were Mohammed Atta, the mastermind of the plot, along with Marwan al-Shayhi, Ziad Jarrah, and others who would later become the hijackers of the 4 planes. The men met at the Al-Quds Mosque in Hamburg, where they were introduced to radical Islamist teachings and eventually recruited by senior Al-Qaeda operatives, including Osama bin Laden. They were trained and indoctrinated in the ideology of violent jihad, believing that their mission was divinely ordained, to carry out a devastating attack on the United States, a country they viewed as the enemy of Islam. Over the years, these men forged their bond, quietly preparing for the day they would execute their plan. The pilots, their roles in the attack. Each of the hijackers had a specific role in the execution of the plan, but the pilots, Atta, al-Shayhi, and Jarrah, were the key figures who carried out the actual hijackings. Mohammed Atta. Atta was the leader of the Hamburg cell and the ringleader of the hijacking plot. He was the one who took charge of the mission, even though he was not the most experienced pilot. His primary role was to lead the operation and fly American Airlines Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Atta's leadership and determination were crucial in the success of the mission. The plan takes shape. The hijackings begin. American Airlines Flight 11. At 7:59 a.m., Flight 11, a Boeing 767, took off from Boston's Logan Airport, bound for Los Angeles. The powerful engines roared to life as the aircraft rolled down runway 4R, accelerating until the wheels lifted from the ground. The 767 climbed smoothly into the sky, banking westward toward its intended route over New York State. The city of Boston faded below, disappearing beneath a layer of morning haze. In the cockpit, Captain Oganovsky and First Officer McGinnis adjusted their heading, confirming altitude clearances with air traffic control.
Northwest 206, leveling flight level 190, check now.
Northwest 206, Boston, Tennessee, indicated speed.
Right now, 310.
Right. American 11, contact Boston Center, 127.82.
2782 is long, American 11. Boston Center, good morning, American 11 with you, passing through 190-230.
American 11, Boston, Center, roger, climb maintain for level 280.
280, American 11.
FedEx 3258, you're cleared direct to Barnes.
Direct to Barnes, this is FedEx 3258.
The flight attendants began their first round of service, moving up and down the aisles, offering coffee and orange juice to the passengers who settled into their seats, expecting an uneventful 5-hour journey. 8:14 a.m. hijackers stormed the cockpit. At 8:23 a.m. Mohammed Atta makes his first transmission meant for the passengers but was transmitted to ATC.
We have some planes, just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport.
And who's trying to call me here?
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll endanger yourself and the airplane.
Then, at 8:28 a.m., Flight 11 banked sharply to the left. It was no longer heading west. The aircraft was making an aggressive turn south, veering toward the Hudson River. Controllers in Boston watched their radar screens in confusion. This wasn't a return to Logan Airport. It was something far worse. Inside the cabin, the passengers sat frozen, some quietly praying, others desperately trying to make calls. Flight attendants, now hostages themselves, whispered to the airline's ground staff, trying to relay what little they knew. At 8:33 a.m. Mohammed Atta makes his final transmission.
Move, please. We are going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
In the cockpit, Atta and his men were laser-focused. They had disabled the transponder, making the aircraft harder to track. The plane's descent was deliberate but controlled, bringing it lower and lower as the skyline of Manhattan appeared in the distance. The North Tower stood in front of them, its twin rising beside it, gleaming in the morning sun. This was the target. Atta gripped the yoke tighter, his breathing steady. His men stood behind him, watching, waiting. This was the moment they had trained for. The Boeing 767 roared over the Hudson, descending rapidly. New Yorkers on the streets below looked up, puzzled. A commercial airliner was flying far too low, far too fast. Inside the cockpit, Atta made final adjustments. There would be no hesitation. The Boeing 767 shuddered as it rocketed downward, slicing through the cool morning air at nearly 500 miles per hour. The altitude warnings blared. Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain. A desperate mechanical voice pleading for the pilot to pull up, to save the doomed aircraft. But Atta didn't flinch. Instead, his right hand reached forward, gripping the throttle levers. With a final act of unwavering resolve, he pushed them forward. The engines screamed as they spooled up, the turbines roaring with a deafening crescendo. The plane surged with raw, unrelenting speed, a steel beast charging toward its target with merciless intent.
Traffic. Yeah, he's in sight.
Okay, you can maneuver as necessary to avoid that aircraft, sir. I do not know what he's doing. Delta 2315, any evasive action you need
At
to take is
8:14
approved.
a.m., just minutes after Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, another Boeing 767, took off from Boston, bound for Los Angeles. Marwan al-Shehi, along with hijackers Fayez Banahamad, and others, had taken control of the plane within 15 minutes of takeoff. The hijackers slashed their way into the cockpit and subdued the crew. Flight 175 circled Manhattan, before its final descent. Al-Shehi was Atta's close associate and the pilot of United Airlines Flight 175. He was a passionate and dedicated individual, equally devoted to the cause. Al-Shehi's role was to execute the hijacking of the second plane and crash it into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. His hijacking was synchronized with Atta's, aiming to maximize the devastation. At 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757, took off from Washington Dulles International Airport, heading to Los Angeles. Hani Hanjar, who had received flight training at a U.S. flight school, was at the controls. Along with him were fellow hijackers Khalid al-Midr and Nawaf al-Hazmi. They took control of the plane at 8:51 a.m. Flight 77 deviated from its original course and headed back towards Washington, D.C. Hanger first traveled to the United States in the mid-1990s to take flight lessons. He struggled with flying, often described as a poor pilot by instructors, but he managed to obtain a commercial pilot's license in 1999. During this time, he drifted further into radical Islamist circles, eventually being recruited into Al-Qaeda's planes operation due to his flight experience. Unlike the Hamburg cell, Hani Hanger followed a different path to September 11. His journey into extremism was less about deep ideological transformation and more about opportunity.
Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Pull up. Pull up. Terrain, terrain. Pull up. Terrain, terrain. Pull up. Pull up.
The last flight to take off was United Airlines Flight 93, which departed from Newark, New Jersey. 9:28 a.m. hijackers stormed the cockpit and took control. At 8:42 a.m. the hijackers aboard this flight included Ziad Jarrah, Ahmed Al-Nami, and Ahmed Al-Hasnawi. In 1996, Ziad Jarrah moved to Germany to study aeronautical engineering, but in Hamburg, fate placed him in the orbit of Atta and al-Shayhi, men whose ideology was sharper than steel, forged in deep-seated anger and religious extremism.
I would like to all remain seated. We are warm aboard and we are going to back to the airport and we have our demand to remain quiet.
As the plane made its way across the country, the passengers on board became aware of the attacks unfolding in New York and Washington. They received phone calls from family members and quickly realized that their flight was also in danger. Passengers like Todd Beamer, Tom Burnett, and Jeremy Glick managed to reach people on the ground. Through these calls, they learned about the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. In response, they decided to fight back, knowing that their only chance to stop the hijackers was to overpower them before reaching their target. Jarrah begins rocking the plane violently to knock passengers off their feet. Hijackers had one goal: to reach Washington, D.C., and crash the plane into a target, perhaps the U.S. Capitol or the White House. But what they hadn't counted on was the courage of the passengers. The passengers, armed with whatever they could find, luggage carts, boiling water, and sheer will, launched a coordinated assault. They surged forward, fighting back against the terrorists in a battle of life and death. For a brief moment, the cockpit door burst open, but the struggle inside the cockpit was too great. Unlike Atta or al-Shaihi, Jarrah's path to 9/11 was marked by hesitation. But in the end, whether by force or by choice, he fulfilled his deadly role. In the final seconds, the passengers managed to breach the cockpit door, but before they could stop the hijackers, Jarrah rolled the plane in an inverted nose dive, crashing into a field in Shanksville. At 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after the hijackers lost control of the aircraft during the struggle. The intended target was believed to be either the White House or the U.S. Capitol, but the passengers' resistance prevented a much larger catastrophe. The aftermath from the coordinated attacks of September 11, 2001, forever altered the course of history. Nearly 3,000 people died, and the World Trade Center towers collapsed, leaving behind a nation in shock and mourning. In the aftermath, the United States declared a war on terror, leading to military action in Afghanistan and heightened security measures worldwide. The Hamburg cells plot was a direct attack on the US, but it also represented something much broader, the rise of a radical jihadist movement that had infiltrated the heart of Western society. The actions of Atta, al-Shaihi, Jarrah, and their fellow hijackers changed the world, and the reverberations of that tragic day continue to shape international politics, security policies, and global relations.
Here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene.